What we think we know about money, how we think it works, is wrong. So says my guest today, Felix Martin, the author of a new book which claims a mass misunderstanding of the nature of money was the root cause of the financial crisis. Money, the Unauthorised Biography, proposes that a restoration of a true understanding of money as a social technology should drive radical reforms to prevent such a crisis recurring and to revive capitalism. Felix, hello. You explain in 300, I must say, supremely well written pages why most economists, politicians and the general public have misunderstood money. It's not, for instance, notes and coins. Can you explain in a sentence or two what money really is?
Yes. The book is the story of two ways of looking at money, one of which has been very dominant and I think remains very dominant. And that is the idea that money was originally something physical, usually gold and silver. And then at some point someone came up with the idea that one could lend and borrow this physical money, and that was the invention of credit. And then still later institutions were invented that specialized in building these superstructures of credit on this physical money. And the alternative view in the history of economic thought is almost exactly the other way round. It is that it is the system of credit and clearing which is money and is the important thing about it. And the tokens that are used to represent money are not in themselves intrinsically important. And the case that I try to make in my book is that taking this second minority view in the history of economic thought of what money is and how it works has very important consequences for our modern day problems.
And why is this misunderstanding, the majority view, why has it been so dangerous?
It's been dangerous, I think. There are two main reasons why it's dangerous. There are a whole lot of questions, in particular about monetary policy, about the management, for example, of the monetary standard, which do not really appear in economic thinking if you take the first view. And the modern manifestation of this has been the popularity of the modern macroeconomic models that we use in central banks, the focus on inflation targeting and the lack of focus, if you like, on financial stability and asset prices and balance sheets and so on. That, I argue, is a consequence of thinking about money in the first way, whereas thinking about money in the second way would cause people to focus much more on those financial stability issues.
So if you were to take the kind of lessons, you set this in a great historical context, which I think is one of the valuable things about the book, but what lessons would history teach to modern policymakers, and are they actually absorbing these lessons as far as you can tell?
Well, I think one lesson would be that throughout history, I mean the time we're living in now is a bit of a discrepancy. Throughout most of history, the deliberate management of the monetary standard in order to redistribute wealth between different parts of the money-using population has been front and foremost, and we shouldn't be afraid of that. We shouldn't be afraid of using monetary policy to engineer a redistribution of wealth from creditors to debtors, if that is what is required by the current economic conjunction. Of course, at this time, when we're living with a huge overhang of debts, private sector debts and public sector debts, we're confronting exactly that kind of question. And so I think taking this alternative view of money can inform that discussion about whether we should have, for example, higher inflation targets, at least temporarily, as an alternative option to sweating off debt over time.
This is pretty radical reforms that you propose. I mean, is there really any chance, given that the kind of consensus, the orthodox economists still hold to the first version of money, the wrong version, as you say, is there really any chance that there will be a take-up of some of these reforms?
Well, I think if you'd said that to me 5 or 6 years ago, before this last crisis, I would have said absolutely not, and I would have agreed with you entirely. But I think actually if one looks at what's happening in some of the major central banks, I mean, we're here holding this interview, not more than a couple of months after the announcement of an absolutely unprecedented program in Japan. We're about to see a new governor of the Bank of England here in the UK who has voiced sympathy for some of these more radical types of policies. So I think that actually on the practical agenda we are moving in the direction of some of the things I'm talking about, and therefore it would be useful for people to be able to understand why this is being done and what the possibilities are. I also want to say, however, that An important second part of the agenda, which I believe this leads to, is an intellectual one. It is very important that modern economics adapts itself to take a more integrated view of money, finance and macroeconomics. These things have grown apart, and ideas are powerful things, and they can lead to the kinds of crises we've just seen. And I think if that intellectual agenda results in a more integrated approach in our universities, in our central banks, in our ministries of finance and amongst the general public to finance and economics together, I think we'll see better long-run outcomes.
It's a radical ambition. It's also a timely one. Felix Martin, thank you very much.
Thank you.